Welcome, everybody, to Flat Earth Nation. It is a Flat Earth Nation. Don't let them tell you anything else unless they're willing to debate you in a fair and honest way, because aren't we running out of time? Hasn't it been so long with our hand to the plow? And we just want some peace and comfort from the Lord. Well, we'll get it. His mercies are new every morning. Rosie, Pakistan. I love it. That is the coolest thing I've heard in a while. Hey, I got these things pulled up we got to look at. Starting out with, I just was looking at the news, and there was something about Jimmy Savile. I guess he's got some public relations advice, the Prince Charles, the future king. Because all these guys are in it together. And, there was a lot of rumors. We're going to be talking, tonight I've got this video that is what they are teaching high school teachers in 2018 about all the conspiracy theories that were going around then, Sandy Hook, 9/11. The first one that, you'll see in the beginning of the video, he says, can you guys name any conspiracies that those people have? I'm not saying you, but those people. And the first one they spit out was NASA was fake. And then they named about 20 more that I believe. I think all those conspiracies are true. I think it's like that Jimmy Savile. I think that everybody knew, and there are people saying this, weird things happen, and they're, but what can you do when everybody on the news says no? Jimmy Savile, he's a sir, he's a knight. He's their Dick Clark. Now look at everything's wrote letters to pedophile. Jimmy Savile wrote letters to pedophile. Send me a little bit. They even look alike. He looks like anybody wonder what the lead singer from U2 is going to grow up and look like? Here's that video of this guy. I got about 28 minutes in and I thought, man, this is really what you need here. This class is part of a seminar for high school teachers hosted by the Gilder Leaderman Institute of American History. He's a teacher from a college, so they're probably getting their continuing education credits. CEE, continuing education. And you go to a few of these, next thing you know, you got a master's degree if you're one of these high school teachers. In 2018, this is basically how they were telling people, because flat earth was becoming big then. And a lot of proof was getting out and they had to head it off. Well, they sent out their squads, right? What else can it be? They sent out their squads. Welcome to Fractal Dust Bear. Did I say hola to Seven Head and Yas Will Soaring? I hope I did. So we've got that. Was going to look at this 1947. In this, at the 23-minute mark where you saw me, bring it back here to where we can get into it. He mentioned the most important thing that conspiracy people should be talking about is the National Security Act of 1947. He said that did everything. So I haven't read it yet, but it sounds intriguing. Before World War II, congressional committees oversaw the cabinet-level War Department, Navy Department. And while each existed as separate from the other, both departments were able to obtain aircraft. During this time, the president said, no, we need an Air Force, a war effort. We need to pay attention to the logistics of war. I guess that's what war is. Logistics hell. Here's some of the people involved. He's the guy that, the pot called the kettle black. Watch out for the military industrial complex. Well, he was a big part of it. Same with his buddies that helped form the banana republics from the United Fruit Company. Well, look at those. Can't wait. Remember, this is your Constitution from the 1958 Educational Act. And where everyone that got any expenditure, so if you were a senator or a congressman and you got paid by the government, you had to, under the authority of this act, moving forward, shall be used to make payments or loans to anybody, payments or loans to any individual, unless said individual has executed and filed with the commissioner an affidavit that he does not believe in a conspiracy and is not a member of someone who believes in a conspiracy, a member of and does not support any organization that believes in or teaches the overthrow of the United States government by force or violence or by any illegal or unconstitutional methods, and has taken and subscribed to an oath or affirmation in the following: I do solemnly swear or affirm that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the United States of America and will support and defend the Constitution of these United States against all its enemies. That's new. That you don't have to. Oh, we weren't taken over. There wasn't a government switch, and now everything's, we're a new type of government, and we're switching to TV and Hooterville, and wow, look, a telephone, everybody. All coming from the National Defense Education Act of 1958. Hopefully we'll be able to tie in something of this, in between the wars. Don't they rewrite the history? I looked at this Payne Stewart thing. Just seems funny. Died in a plane flying over the United States, right at the peak of his famous golf stardom. Just had to let it, he was 42 years old, had to let it run out of fuel. It was a ghost plane, climbed up to 50,000 feet. The pilot describes that the windows appeared to be opaque, as if condensation or ice had formed inside the cabin. Very mysterious, very mysterious. And he wore those funny pants. He was famous for wearing them. And I think, you can trace these people by anything. And those funny pants he wore were called +4s. And here is a sporting them in the 30s, made famous by, hey, do you have Prince Albert in the can? Yep, that Prince Albert. That Prince Albert. But the golfing made me think of, have you ever heard that expression? I could have got it done, but I was stymied right at the most important part. I was looking up the rules to golf, and I guess stymied is if somebody's ball's in front of you, even if it's on the green, they weren't allowed to move it. You had to chip it over that ball. You were stymied. And I think that, since they do believe in game theory, and I don't think they're playing chess, maybe among themselves at the higher levels, deciding, well, who are we going to do attack or harp attack with tornadoes this week? What country gets a tsunami? you know, this guy wants to get payback for that mafia deal. They lost 2 loads of fentanyl crossing the American border, so we want to give a cyclone to Tijuana. I bet it, I wouldn't be surprised. That's the kind of conspiracies I'm talking about, people. Right? I was thinking the same thing. It's like 35,000 feet, Luther, something like that. Anybody? Anybody? Stymied? No, we're done. Oh, man, I wanted that. You know what? I think I saved that picture. I wanted you to see this. Now, see, this is early golf with the hickory shafts. Just learning golf. Got an Orphan over here. He's for sale for $17. I'm just kidding. That's probably the 17th hole. But look at the town in the background. In the 1870s, got time for golf. I mean, that's a funny way of holding the bag, but I don't see no plus. I don't see those funny pants. +4s, those are called. +4. Doesn't that look like the Reichstag? Why does everyone hate the English? What's this doing here? I thought this was. Well, you know, they're cousins. The Kaiser and King George were cousins during World War I. Huh. The British and the German were cousins. The Queen of England was his grandma. Wow. So anyway, their real name isn't Windsor. It's this. They changed it during World War I because they didn't want people to think they were still German. So they said, no, our name's Windsor. I'm the Duke of Windsor, man. And everybody went, okay, reset, Windsor. Well, there's a Windsor, I think. No, what's this? Very, you know, this is back when they had city-states. Before Satan was loosed, 1711, and they started consolidating, saying, no, we need to make nations now. Nations are what we need. Yeah, we need United Nations, League of Nations, and whatever they're going to call it when Barack Obama takes over. You know, because this United Nations isn't working. Can I get a witness? Isn't that what they say? This United Nations isn't working because there's those 6 powers that rule the Arctic, not the Antarctic. They say that's on the bottom. I know it's a plane with that dome over it, right? I know. But they call one the Arctic positive pole, the Antarctic. It's not the Arctic. See, I feel like I'm overemphasizing tonight because I feel like, you know, for at least like almost an hour of this, I'm just going to be watching another person's videos waiting to get triggered. So I feel like I've got to try to get my wisecracks in right now. Ask Aaron. Sometimes you got to get your wisecracks in early, right, Aaron? I'm wisecracking about Edward VIII because this guy, Edward VIII, it just didn't happen. Good evening to everyone. Did we get Edward VIII?
France and then to Madrid. On the 21st of June, the French signed an armistice agreement with the Germans. Most British people were heading for Bordeaux, the Atlantic ports, in the Bay of Biscay, which was Vichy France in an attempt to escape where the ships were coming to take them off. What was when British people were heading for Bordeaux, the Atlantic ports, and the Bay of Biscay, which was Vichy France in an attempt to escape.
Vichy France were the French who wanted the Nazis to win.
But the ships were coming to take them off. What does Windsor do? He heads for Madrid. Spain was a potential ally of Hitler's. It was a hotbed of intrigue. And it's astonishing to me that somebody in Windsor
is in the United States. This was due to be the next destination for the Duke to promote his message of a negotiated peace. President Roosevelt insisted that the visit was called on. Roosevelt's suspicions about Edward's misguided adventures have been raised in a secret State Department report, which we found locked away in the University of Delaware. In June 1937, George Messersmith was a young American diplomat in Vienna when he met the Windsors at an official dinner. Believing that he was speaking in confidence, Messersmith revealed to the Duke.
Man, you believe that? The audio is just not quite good enough for that one. But Prince Edward, the one who married the divorcee, the boy that pretended to be a girl, Wallace Simpson, he was going to be like in their plans when the merge. I don't know when it went bad, but he was one of these guys. And these things just happened. It lasted from 1826 to 1918. And how do we know? Yeah, back then they had dukies and principalities, but now they're just want nations. It became the free state of Bavaria, but that's not good enough. We want United States in a country. So somehow they got the queens and all your, they're going to do it. They had the German gold mark. Here's another list of people that are, I looked up this one thing of the Knights of the Royal Order of the Seraphim. Doesn't that sound ominous and spooky? The Order of the Seraphim. It's royalty people. It's all from the royalty in Sweden, I think. She's the princess of both of these. You see, everything's going back to the way they wanted it before World War I. How long ago really was it? I don't know how I got here from. I got there from the Order of the Seraphim. Here's the Greater Habit. You think they were doing weird stuff back then? Not keeping secrets? Oh, their hearts weren't like our hearts that have to get born again. They were pure. Sure they were. They were people who would fillet people and burn them alive. That's all from this guy here, Prince Hubertus. Is there anything weird about this picture? Then I looked up this stuff. Well, maybe we can get back to that later. This video might take a while, the one about the conspiracies. I was studying these people, this New Netherland, and there's some funny named people that live there, Woorens or something. And they're talking about this one family and a book called The Orphan Masters of New Amsterdam. That's the name of a book. he took the minutes for an organization called the Orphan Masters of New Amsterdam. There's some other stuff. Now, as I was going through this, and watching something about Manhattan. Now, these guys, the New Netherland, they were the ones that whole, sketchy, we bought the land for $24. At the same time, the in American money, William Pitt was buying other land from Native Americans for equivalent of like 21 million. They got theirs for 24. So that story doesn't float. So we were looking at that, and he was the one that went to work for another company. Anyway, it's all sketchy. Don't believe anything about the $24 purchase. That was all sketchy. I'm seeing my background change on me weirdly. So we're almost ready to get at that. So I looked up these Orphan Masters and a couple of other things. And here was a book that had their minutes. And here are I thought I had their minutes. Oh, this was another book. Oh, man. Well, this was another one written in that same era about the city of amalgamation. Very famous around that. Just shows the blacks and the whites were mixing too much. And some of the upper class just wasn't going to have it. I'm sure these people are very important. But something happened. It all starts with these type of people. They're not like us. They don't really care about us. Now, the whole deal with the Bible, flat earth, people trying to warn you that 9/11 was an inside job. I need people that are going to go forward going like, yeah, we already know that. We believe that. That don't need it to every week to be, give me one more thing of how come those buildings shouldn't fall at free fall speed. I can't. This is why they're teaching people to teach the young people to use propaganda, say none of those things. Sandy Hook. They're squashing, the debate. You can't debate the NASA thing. They couldn't have done it. You can't be a Christian and go, well, it doesn't matter. I believe in a globe, and I love the globe, and I don't care what the Bible says. You're just reading it wrong. No, we're not. And how long do we want to play that game of we're going to win them over instead of there's something imminent happening right now? Yeah, they had fig tree warnings. Armageddon's over. They added 1,000 years, but there's still Gog and Magog. And a judgment that's coming, not a restoration, while we sit around rehashing the same ideas, knowing it's only going to get worse by the end of this month. They're not going to straighten things out with one more election. He's going to talk about it. One of the main things that he calls the conspiracies from the right and the left, but mostly the right is, their thing is just, oh, this next election is the most important time in our whole life. It's right now. If we don't do it, the Supreme Court's going to fall. We got to do this and that. So back to the two people that they put out there. Have there ever been two people more unworthy of being elected by fill in the blank for the presidential election of that year? With what we know now about George Bush and John McCain running against John Kerry? Olympia Dukakis, then Michael Dukakis, her son, gets beat by a Bush. Hillary and Trump, the two best people. I know, but Trump's still not Hillary. He's Epstein's friend. Get on the same page, man. P and Q are not your friend. I don't care if he's better than Hillary. No cuss word of your choice. He's still Epstein's friend. He's still a lying mafia, did business in Atlantic City. You don't get in there without the mob guy. This isn't a restoration of a never once great country. This is a rescue of sheep who are going to be separated away from the carnage that's coming because they don't want their children to see it, because that's called love.
Person who is part of a culture that you're also critiquing. When I was in graduate school, I was working on spiritualism. I'm not sure how familiar you are with spiritualism, but spiritualism was the popular belief in the 1850s that it was possible to talk to the spirits of the dead. And it becomes a kind of cultural phenomenon of people having seances, and it goes through the 1860s of talking to the dead and the Fox sisters in 1848. And the thing that fascinated me was I was well familiar with the academic work on religion and folk belief, things like Keith Thomas's Religion and the Decline of Magic, right? Which is that as we become more modern in the Enlightenment, our beliefs in things like witches and monsters and fairies are diminishing. And yet in the 1850s, at a time of steamships and the telegraph, when we're laying transatlantic telegraph cables that link New York and London, people in America and in other parts of Europe, but particularly in America, are being fascinated and deeply believing in the existence of talking to spirits. How do you have both things? How do we move in this direction towards modernity, establishing the Erie Canal and the steamship and the telegraph, and at the same time, this culture is also looking back to beliefs that would not be out of place in Salem in the 1690s, right? So, but I want to talk also, so keep that in the back of your head. I want to talk about, when I say conspiracy theorists, or we talk about American conspiracies, what are some of the kind of conspiracies that we're talking about? What are conspiracies that you know of in the United States? Yes, sir. We did not land on the moon hoax. Yes.
Oh, thanks a lot, Tinkerbell.
Right. This is Second Amendment kind of New World Order stuff. Yes. Sandy Hook didn't happen. Right. Others? JFK assassination. Holocaust didn't happen. Parkland shooting is set up. Right. So kids, crisis actors. So we could go on and on and on, right? So here's the short list. Kennedy assassination, birthers, Obama was born in the United States, truthers, 9/11 was an inside job, UFOs, that the United States government is hiding information about aliens and UFOs, right? FEMA, New World Order, J-Hell martial law. This is we're going to put people in FEMA camps. The ATF is going to take our guns so we can disarm the American population. This is crisis actors around every shooting, right? NAFTA and the AMERO. Is it people with the AMERO? The AMERO was, NAFTA is the North American Free Trade Agreement. There was an argument in the 1990s that NAFTA was leading into what was going to be a tri-union of the United States, Mexico, and Canada that would use a new dollar bill called the AMERO. In fact, there were reports coming out about red money. And so when we've redesigned our currency, you have recognized we redesigned our currency, when people saw stacks of those, the thought was, this is going to be the AMERO. This will be our new dollar, right? Vaccines, GM foods, mercury, autism, weather modifications, chemtrails, the Fed, the moon landing was a hoax, UN Conspiracies, Agenda 21. Agenda 21 was signed in Rio de Janeiro. It is the UN agenda for sustainable growth, environmental protection, and other things. Supposedly, in the eyes of many conspiracy theorists, this is the bill, this is the plan of radical population reduction to get the population of the world down to 300 million using chemtrail, and all these things often tie together, right? Crisis actor Sanders heard of Bilderbergers. Bilderberg Conference is a conference of world economic and political leaders that is closed to the public. Rothschilds, widespread population reduction, right? Yes. Absolutely. Yes. So, so many. So I think there are, and it's, as we talked about it, if you wanted to, we could have gone on for another 20 minutes coming up with deeper and deeper conspiracies, right? Or different versions of the same ones. So a wide range. Some of them are spectacular and truly weird. David Icke, who I'm not sure if you're familiar with, David Icke is a British broadcaster, sports broadcaster, who became convinced that the royal family and other world leaders are all actually shape-shifting aliens who are lizards. And that the royal families of Europe that are all tied by blood, right? In World War I, all of the combatants in Europe are all kin, they're all cousins. Right, so they're all a family in a sense, that they are all actually shape-shifting lizards. Not believed by very many, but spectacular. There are some that are believed in nearly evergreen, right? The Kennedy assassination. There are Kennedy assassination conspiracy believers of all stripes from all different places, and we'll talk about that a little bit. Others are widespread that keyed into cultural moments, like the birther controversy. The birther controversy was very big news in the late 20-teens. Will probably not be huge news 15, 20 years from now. It's not probably going to be the Kennedy assassination. There are some that never take, right? There was an argument that Obama sabotaged the Deepwater Horizon in the Gulf of Mexico to have new policies against oil use, to push solar power, but this one came up, was sampled, everyone was like, no, and then it kind of went away again, right? So this happens in this kind of life cycle of conspiracy theories. So the reality, and one of the things we have to think about, and the second part when we talk about what we do with our students and how we talk to our students about conspiracies and how we talk to our fellow American citizens about conspiracies, one of the things we have to acknowledge as part of this conversation is that conspiracies exist. If you say a conspiracy is a group of people working together, often in secret, to advance an agenda beneficial to them, then conspiracies are literally everywhere. Every corporation that is coming up with a new rollout of the bacon double cheeseburger with Rio sauce, the 11 herbs and spices in KFC, the secret formula of Coke. What I mean is people meet in secret to do all kinds of things for their own interests. And right now, maybe less now than in the Cold War, there are people in high-rise office buildings thinking of how to protect you. The CIA, the FBI, Justice Department. There were also, certainly when I was a child in the 1980s, living outside of MacDill Air Force Base, there was someone probably not much older than me somewhere in Russia sitting on an ICBM targeted with my neighborhood, right? There are secret groups working against you and protecting you. We live in a web of secrecy. Not all of it is a conspiracy. But we have to recognize that conspiracies do exist, right? So I think that when we talk about conspiracy culture, when we talk about conspiracies, it seems like we're talking about something that's weird and strange and outside of the mainstream, outside of the way that most of us, because we all generally think of us as a group, right? Educated educators who teach people we are not part of this group, that group is out there. And this is a fringe, strange part of American culture. I disagree. I think that conspiracies is how Americans do politics. It is often the first move. When I heard yesterday, maybe you did too, that Stormy Daniels got arrested, I had conversations with no less than 5 people about it yesterday, who are all of differing education levels from high school to postgraduate medical school, who all said they set her up. Who they is, why they set her up, but the first thought is they set her up, right? There's a growing sense in the United States, and I'm going to trace some of these conspiracies from early on in our founding to the present day, of about this is a way that Americans do politics, think politically. And it's also part of our, and maybe other countries too. I don't know that it's just unique to America, but America is what I've studied. And it certainly is a powerful force here. The way we think about politics, whether it is Bernie was rooked out of by a conspiracy of the Clintons, or Trump saying this is a conspiracy to get me unelected, or all of these simple things, probably down to every local school board of a conspiracy to do one thing or another. Put in a street light, change the hours of the bus drop schedule, whatever, right? So
change the bus drop schedule or whatever. Have you guys
in my classes, I talk about the occult.
have you had have they named a conspiracy yet that you haven't kind of, looked at yourself? I mean, is there one? Is there anybody out there that's gonna, want to drop something in the comment and go like, yeah, but I think that one was real. The Boston Marathon Massacre. How come they didn't mention that one yet? I mean, that was totally faked. Plans, skit, drills, the Las Vegas thing. Is this one of those deals where, and eventually if free speech is to the point of where, people in my situation, let's face it, I got a channel that's in the top 10% of YouTubers. There'll be dozens of people that could watch this by the weekend. And it's hard to get hits on YouTube. I'm just kidding you. But the Bilderbergers and everything, they're all tying into it. But we have, you know me, we've studied the Bible, we've gone back and we've seen how many people it took to maintain their cities. And we can't do it. We don't know what happened. We don't need our high school teachers telling our children they got it figured out, because they do not have it figured out. Rolling. But here it is. Let's see. There's one man here, and he doesn't look like he's in the class. He's monitoring the other teacher. And just like my sister, the superintendent where we grew up, all women. There's your educators.
And on one level, the occult is exactly what we tend to think of as the occult. Werewolves, demons, witches, monsters, magic, right? That is the occult. And that's part of American culture, right? I mean, certainly Salem witch trials.
And don't tell me this guy doesn't look like Matt Damon in Good Will Hunting.
Other places where this kind of what we tend to think of as scary supernatural beliefs come up. But I also think there's a big part of the occult in the Latin sense of occultus, of hidden, of an American fascination with hidden knowledge that shows up in our popular culture, that shows up in our advertisements, that shows up in our TV shows. This idea that Americans are haunted by, that the world is not what we see, and the real things that happen and really affect us, the important things are the things that are happening hidden underground both metaphorically and quite literally, okay? That them are making the decisions. And them are somewhere hidden underground, and we have to find a way to discover what reality actually looks like, right? So occult thinking conspiratorially is how Americans react to the world, how they interact with the world. It is part of our popular culture. You can also look at, for example...
So all the teachers that raise your children are having their brain assuaged with the idea, that's just who we are. And then they're saying brain assuages. They're Muslims. That's just what they do. No. Well, let's play that game. We're mud flood was Armageddon type Christians. What should we do?
You look at just advertisements. Here are 10 ancient diet secrets that they don't want you to know. That if you watch, certainly I watched a lot of, because I didn't have a lot better things to do. I watched a lot of Oprah and daytime television during the 80s and 90s, right? Here are diet secrets. Here are beauty secrets. Here are things that your cardiologist doesn't want you to know. Here's the way to eat. And if you eat this way, you'll magically lose weight. And your cardiologist doesn't want you to know that so that you stay fat and have to come and get a heart transplant, whatever. But that idea of there's a secret knowledge of a way to do things and some powerful force wants to keep you from doing it. And that is in politics, that is in culture, that's in popular culture, right?
That's in politics, culture, popular culture. What's the difference between culture and popular culture? Just a bit, their levels. We have to be aware that we are being programmed at all times. Otherwise, we wouldn't hear today 1/3 of the children 12 to 16 have diabetes.
I looked through the TV listings. It is hard to find a night in TV. I would argue that you might not be able to find a night in popular culture where one of the major shows on networks is not about exactly this, right? Is not about secret groups of agents stopping underground groups. 24, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., right? Angels and Demons, X-Files comes back. X-Files was massive in the 90s, right? But again, all of these things, Buffy, the idea, I mean, again, I was joking that I was watching Downton Abbey with my wife, and I realized about 4 episodes in that something was missing. And I turned to her and I said, where are the vampires? Like, how is it that we're going to go 4 episodes of a show, then, like, no one has superpowers? Like, no, there's no like, the Kaiser's not a werewolf? How is this possibly a show, right? So this is what we are obsessed by, right? And it is percolating through our culture in ways that Americans are prepared to think that there is an occult underground world, an occult not necessarily werewolves and vampires, but hidden, that's away from us, that some other people control. This came up a year ago, I showed it, and I always try to find things that are more popular. This was so good, I could not use it, right? This was on Twitter. Sometimes it's a horrible mistake to let 10-year-olds name their own baseball team. Then again, sometimes they crush it. And the kid has his baseball team, Little League team, is the Illuminati. With the baseball back of the jersey being trust no one with the all-seeing Illuminati eye. I think if you would have let me name my when I was on Ken's Barbershop, which is my actual Little League team when I was 10, we would have never come up with Illuminati, right? So what does it mean to have kids name themselves after, as we'll talk about, a 1770s Enlightenment underground movement in Bohemia, and to have trust no one as the tagline? Now, partially, this is from the X-Files. This is a joke. This is not serious. Or is it, right? What does this say about our culture?
Perhaps it says that the not too distant memory of a very few remnants have left us with old wives' tales of witches like Hansel and Gretel, who weren't just misunderstood and blamed, but were really bad people who ate children, evil queens, secret societies. We think that was true. We think Grimm's fairy tale is more realistic than Davy Crockett, king of the wild frontier.
Kaczynski, who studies conspiracy theories, did a study for his 2014 book and asked, big events like wars, the current recession, and the outcomes of elections are controlled by small groups of people who are working in secret against the rest of us. We'll talk about more on this in our second hour, right? Only 30% disagree. Okay. Kyrie Irving believes the earth is flat. They lie to us, right? So part of this is, I don't want to necessarily make fun of Kyrie Irving, but I wanted to read some of this, right? So this is from the Sporting News, not known as necessarily being deep into conspiracy theories, but this is the idea that the earth is truly flat and this is being hidden, okay? So the earth is flat, Irving said matter-of-factly. Irving joins rapper B.O.B. as a notable denier of a sphere-shaped planet. Anytime you have a specific question like, quote, is the earth flat or is the earth round, I think you need to do research on it. I think we would all agree. When asked how he can believe the flat theory, Irving responded, because it is right in front of our faces, they lie to us. Irving also acknowledged that he has been taught his entire life that the planet is round, but thinks logically it just doesn't make sense. In other words of Kyrie Irving, if you really think about it from a landscape, the way we travel, the way we move, and the fact that can you really think of us rotating around the sun and all planets aligned, rotating at specific dates, being perpendicular with what's on with these planets and stuff like this, Irving explained using air quotes when saying the word planets. Maybe the Cavaliers don't need to acquire Carmelo Anthony at the trade deadline. Maybe they need Neil deGrasse Tyson. Ha ha ha. I am not here necessarily to make fun of Kyrie Irving, who literally states Newton's theory of planetary motion as a kind of big scam, but
a total scam. And same thing with the math that they call quantum, that led to 97% dark matter. So, oh, wow, now we can develop atomic bombs and the United States can save the day and then get death by 1,000 cuts from revenge.
This quote, because it is right in front of our faces, they lie to us. Trust no one. Okay? So Stefan Diggs, from the wide receiver of the Vikings, said, well, how mad would you guys be if I said I agree with Kyrie? Well, I don't care. Someone responded, you think the earth is flat? And he said, prove that it's not right now. Besides showing me a picture that you got from somewhere, and I'll be a believer. Now, we want to not say that we're talking with a wide receiver of the Minnesota Vikings about whether or not the earth is flat, but look at the evidentiary argumentative moves, right? Which is, I don't believe it, they lied to us, show me a picture, but not one you got from somewhere. Because underneath that is a sense, they lied to us. The evidence itself by which we would argue about whether this is true or not is so tainted that it is not accessible. And that a circular argument in which the evidence you want to introduce will be immediately discounted because the source you're going to produce it from are the only people who can take pictures from space. Who are them?
Right. And when we want to take people out there with those fancy cameras and show them a ship that the bottom's not disappearing first and that we can bring it right back in there and that it's flat when there should be that 1 mile every 8-inch squared thing, they do that same, I don't want to see your evidence. We already have our evidence. Oh, blah, 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 blah. It's because they're not sheep.
We're in a box, an intellectual box. Okay? Richard Hofstadter wrote in 1964 for Harper, so it's an article that you could give to students, and I've given to students. It's very accessible, easy to read, about the paranoid style, and I want to read a little bit. American politics has often been an arena for angry minds, but behind this, I believe there's a style of mind that is far from new and that is not necessarily right-wing. I call it the paranoid style simply because no other word adequately evokes the sense of heated exaggeration, suspiciousness, and conspiratorial fantasy that I have in mind. In this essay from 1964, in the wake of Barry Goldwater and the idea of John Birch Society, he's writing about this, but he's also going back in history and writes about conspiracy in the 1850s. This is from a Texas newspaper in the 1850s. It is a notorious fact that the monarchs of Europe and the Pope of Rome are at this very moment plotting our destruction and threatening extinction of our political, civil, and religious institutions. We have the best reasons for believing that corruption has found its way into our executive chamber and that our executive head is tainted with the infectious venom of Catholicism. So
wow, I bet they wish now they would have listened.
1850s, there is a worldwide conspiracy against the United States, but it's from the Pope, and it has already infected the presidency. There are many things you could probably say about Franklin Pierce, but I don't think that he was a pawn of the Pope, right? Also, communists. This is Joe McCarthy speaking in the 1950s. Which is, how can we account for our present situation unless we believe that men high in this government are concerting to deliver us to disaster? This must be a product of a great conspiracy on a scale so immense as to dwarf any previous such venture in the history of man. So, not just a conspiracy, the biggest in the history of man, and that this is Eisenhower, who won World War II.
Eisenhower no more won World War II then Schrodinger's cat can be dead and alive at the same time, which is the foundation for their new physics. And it's time for us to know where we stand. With that room full of teachers being taught how to program your children, or by saying, Eisenhower didn't win that war in any way, shape, or form. These people are set up. They do have people at the top. It's not just the last election that was fixed. They're all fixed. They know when, life begins at conception. They just don't care.
Is actually a secret pawn of the communists. If not Eisenhower, then certainly people high up in the White House and the Truman administration. The paranoid spokesman sees the fate of conspiracy in apocalyptic terms. He traffics in the birth and death of whole worlds, whole political orders, whole systems of human values. He is always manning the barricades of civilization. He constantly lives at a turning point. Like religious millennialists, he expresses the anxiety of those who are living through the last days, and he is sometimes disposed to set a date for the apocalypse.
And I want to remind you now, the National Defense Act, all you have to do while it's still up, anybody want to just go over here, you can, and then swing down to section 11, I believe. That you don't have to, you have to write. Anybody that's going to get paid by the new government has to have an affidavit filed, executed, filed with the commissioner, an affidavit that he does not believe in and is not a member of any group that does believe in or support any organization that believes in or teaches in the overthrow of the United States government by force or by any other unconstitutional, like blackmail, or that they really lost a war and made a deal or somehow joined with. But you could get paid. You couldn't be a senator. You couldn't be in the House of Representatives. You couldn't have a government in 1958. Now that's a conspiracy with all the people that have, we share all this information, and I've been saying that for a year. When is somebody else going to talk about that? That's not a big deal. It is a big deal.
He is writing about political thinkers, but as a religious historian in particular, this language really speaks out to me in the language of millennialism and apocalyptic visions. And also when you hear people talk in American politics, they talk about a war of civilization. Everything will be over. If we don't have this, a border wall or something else, everything will be gone, will be overridden. That this kind of language of this is the election, that if this election doesn't happen, it's all over because of some dark conspiracy. Okay. The Illuminati, we go back into our history. The Illumined Ones, established in Ingolstadt, Bavaria in 1776, founded by Adam Weishaupt, probably not a real name as it translates to Adam Wisehead, a university professor, is organized to advance the goals of the Enlightenment. So the Illuminati is a real thing. It was a real organization set up for Enlightenment goals that in 1785, Karl Theodor, the leader of Bavaria, issued an edict making all secret societies illegal. Illuminati fled the country. Government seized their letters and papers and published them, basically showing that they were anti-religious. The Enlightenment was often opposed to particularly the Catholic Church, and so this was a reason to expose them. But they show up again in the 1790s in America. And an America that's involved in about to be involved in a quasi-war with France, that's between France and England as they are fighting a revolution. France is fighting a revolution, and England is about to fight a war against France, and America's caught in the middle. And if you
and basically, the French said that if you help us, you can be free. And we said, okay. Because when Cornwallis surrendered to Washington, Lafayette was there. And do a little study for yourself and find out how long did it take the British to leave the United States after supposedly Cornwallis surrendered.
Know about the election of 1800 from Hamilton, etc., right? Jefferson was framed as a French revolutionary who will make the streets of America run with blood, and Adams is phrased as a monarchist who will return the United States to England, right? And the Illuminati was seen as a secret force causing the French Revolution. A small group of people in Bavaria who have already been dispersed are often accused in the 1790s of being the secret force behind the French Revolution. Okay? Freemasonry. This is a constant in American conspiracy theory. It comes up again and again. It established in the 18th century, but it claims an ancient connection to the Temple of Solomon. It's an international society of brotherhood with secret signs and symbols of initiation. Do you recognize any of these symbols? Right? The all-seeing eye of Freemasonry that finds its way both onto the American dollar and onto the jersey of a 10-year-old Little League player. Right? Many of these symbols, the parquet floor, the all-seeing eye, the apron, this is a part of when you look at the language of symbols of American conspiracy theories, these symbols come up again and again, right? And Freemasons are one of those groups. They are pan-national, they are pan-cultural, in which they stretch around the world, that have secret rituals, and those rituals may be no more complicated than the Lions Club in some people's estimation, or part of a secret radical Satanist agenda, depending on how you want to turn it. And in a sense, it's a secret society. We don't know, right? This is a list of famous Masonic leaders. It could go on and on. 27 signers of the Constitution, most of the earliest presidents: Washington, Franklin, Revere, Payne, Monroe, Jackson, Polk, Garfield, McKinley, Roosevelt, Harding, Roosevelt, Johnson, Ford, others. Easy to make the argument, if you were willing to connect particular data points, that the United States government itself is a Masonic plot. Right? The reason the Great Seal looks like a Masonic symbol is that the Masons are basically behind it all. In New York in 1826, a man named William Morgan tried to join the local Mason Lodge and was turned down. So he said, "I'm going to publish a book revealing all of your secrets." He was arrested. When he was released, he never returned home. A body was found in the river in upstate New York. People thought it was Morgan, and there was a full-fledged Masonic panic that the secret society of the Masons was a murderous conspiracy that was attempting to take over the United States. And this was not just a fear that kind of percolated among Americans in upstate New York. It became an organizing principle for a political party. And the anti-Masonic party wins elections in 1832 and 1836. It elects anti-Masons to political office, and its agenda is against people in American government being parts of secret societies. Because if you're a part of the secret society, you're not doing the people's work, and your allegiance is to something else. This was the argument against Kennedy in 1960. The argument that Kennedy, as a Catholic, would have to follow the rules of the Pope rather than serve the American people. In a sense, among people, John Birchers and other people opposed to American Catholicism generally, that you could not be both a Catholic and an American president because you either served one master or the other, right? Same thing with the anti-Masons in the 1830s. But if the modern, and I'm not going to, I mean, there are other...
The John Birchers are a bunch of closet Roman Catholics, big time.
Conspiracies and other things to go through. I'm going to jump ahead now. Because if the way we understand modern conspiracy theories, the way we engage them with our students and with our fellow American citizens, the way we do it now changed. It's not this. Remember, most of these so far are external things, right? The Pope is influencing us from the outside, right? Bankers are influencing us from the outside. Masons are from outside the government creeping in. Now, by the modern age we're in now, many times it's the American government itself. So if the modern conspiracy theories have a birthday, it is in 1947 with the National Security Act of 1947. It establishes the National Security Council. It established the CIA. It establishes the Air Force. The Air Force had prior been part of the Army. It established the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and it creates the CIA, as I said. It's charged with, quote, other functions and duties related to intelligence. That is boring government speak for secret operations, right? Covert Ops. The budget of the Intelligence Committee was going to be a national secret. It will be a black budget, because if we let the Russians know how much we're paying for things in the security, they'll have an estimate of how much money we're spending and what we might be spending it on. But this is really important, because for the first time in American history, the federal government is saying, we are going to have a part of the government that is outside of democratic observation. We are going to have a part of the government that will do secret things that we won't tell you about, that will spend money that we will not reveal, and we will do it to protect us, because we have to have secrets to protect ourselves. And that secret state has evolved and grown and grown and involved in things like the Patriot Act, when it moves into a whole nother level after 9/11, right? But it has a birthday, 1947. Now, the idea of a secret part of the government that does covert operations in a world of the Cold War, post-World War II that we find ourselves in makes a lot of sense, right? There is a reason to have secrets. There is a reason that you might need covert actions. So it's not that this is somehow wicked on its face, but in a population that trusted the American government implicitly, this is going to be fine. If the people know they trust the government to make the right decisions with the power they give them, and they will not abuse it, then having a secret government apparatus isn't a problem. But that is not the country that we are, and it's certainly not the country we are as we move forward, right? This creates a fertile ground for conspiracies. There literally is a box where you can say, the federal government did this, and we know they have secrets and they do things. The defenses against that are, one, humans would never do that against each other. That is not a strong argument given what we know about what humans would do. It's a stronger argument in the 1940s and 50s to say the American government wouldn't do that. So when you get a conspiracy that says the American government did one thing or another, you say the American government wouldn't do that. Again, not a big deal in a society where the people reflexively trust the government. But it is a big deal, particularly for a group of people who are politically awakened by this event. Kennedy shot, not to shock you, Kennedy was shot in Dallas in November 22nd, 1963, right? Afterward, Lee Harvey Oswald is arrested. President is murdered in the middle of the Cold War. Lee Harvey Oswald is arrested. We got the guy. And then Jack Ruby jumps out of a crowd in front of a row of cameras and police officers. A minor league gangster in Dallas jumps out and shoots the person who shot the president in front of national TV. In the context of the Cold War, in the context of knowing that there is a national security state, in the context of this, or just about really to be moving, cultural anxieties of the 1960s. So what do? They put Earl Warren, the former governor of California, and the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court in charge of the Warren Commission to investigate the Kennedy assassination. This is a bid to say, you need to trust us, because if there's one person you can trust, it is the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, the person who in the country is at the top of our judicial branch. He is going to be in charge of this commission, and says he acted alone. One man.
One guy.
The Warren Commission was not believed when it was issued. In November of 1963, 29% believed that one man did it. 52% thought others involved, and some had no opinion. As we move into the 1960s and 70s, as the lack of faith in the United States government increases, as the sense that the government does bad things goes up, as the fear of the United States government increases, that number goes up and up and up. In March 2001, it's at 81%. Did not believe. So what they are saying is, we had an investigation, the government investigated, the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court came out and said, this is what happened, and at some point in 2001, more than 3/4 of the American people go, you're lying. There's a trust no one. They lied to us. Right? And then there are the revelations of government conspiracies that starts in the 1970s. In the Pentagon Papers in 1971, leaked documents about what the United States was doing in Vietnam. Watergate in 1972, that the president himself is about to be indicted for breaking into the offices of the DNC at the Watergate Hotel. Operation Mongoose, there's investigations, the Church Committee, the Committee on Assassinations, and what they come out with is these things that the United States government was doing. Operation Mongoose, we'll talk a little bit, was to harass Castro, working with gangsters like Sam Giancana. COINTELPRO was the counterintelligence program that's monitoring people like Martin Luther King, that was inserting government agents into leftist organizations like SNCC or the SDS. There were times in jokes that at a time there would be some civil rights or leftist meetings in which half the group was informing on the other half, because half of them were working for the NYPD and the other half were working for the FBI, right? Following and taking pictures of King. The House Select Committee on Assassinations comes out in 1976 and raises doubts itself about the Warren Commission. We find out that the CIA helped or aided the overthrow of Iran and Guatemala. Tuskegee syphilis experiments, in which African-American men in Alabama go to a clinic for their syphilis and are not treated so that government doctors can monitor how syphilis progresses through the lifetime, because penicillin has been curing syphilis too early without telling them or their partners, right? Iran Contra in the 1980s, that they're moving guns to Nicaragua, to right-wing groups in Nicaragua. Project Stargate in 1995. This is the revelation that through the 1970s and 1980s, out of Fort Meade, Maryland, the DIA, CIA, it moves around, is operating a program to train psychic spies to spy and use their powers against Russia. John Ronson writes about this in The Men Who Stare at Goats, right? Project Paperclip, Clinton releases it all in 1998. Some of the documents, this is bringing Nazi scientists into the United States to work here. So we fought against the Nazis, and it's not, this again is not a revelation. As early as 1947, 1946, we knew some of this, right? That the people who designed the V2 that hit London are very soon in Huntsville, Alabama, working on the Apollo program, right? But this is Project Paperclip. We release all of the fact that not just things about the kind of big figures that everyone knew about, but all of the rest of the Nazi, and many of them parts of the Nazi party who were snuck out and into the United States, right? So that argument of, well, the United States government wouldn't do this is beginning to fall apart now too. Right?
Doesn't that music
was a proposed secret
looks
plan
like
signed by
it's
the
saying
Bush
Judah, tribe of Judah, this is music.
To justify military action. It's made public in 1997. So in 1997, when Kennedy comes in, the Joint Chiefs say, we want to invade Cuba, we need to have a false flag operation. So the conspiracy theorists who are talking about this are not inventing it out of whole cloth. It's not like they come up with an idea that no one has ever thought of in the government, right? Mongoose was a series of plans to harass Cubans and Cuban leader and assassinate Fidel Castro. Operation Dirty Trick was a plan that if John Glenn's space capsule blew up, they were going to blame it on Cuba. So we have these plans, many of them shelved, not used, but someone's drafting them, right? MK Ultra, Rockefeller Committee first reveals that the CIA was working on mind control, attempting to use LSD to influence people to be able to question them, to make them more compliant, or to turn them into double agents if they could use them on Russians. The Church Committee hands over documents, more handed over in 1978. They randomly drugged civilians. There was an operation called Midnight Climax, in which prostitutes, the Johns coming to visit prostitutes in California and New York, would be given LSD and then monitored without their knowledge to see what would happen to them. So you could live fire test LSD on subjects to see whether this was the kind of chemical that would be able to use to give to, for example, a spy in Moldova and see what would happen. Can we monitor it? Can we weaponize it, right? And all of this is coming out in the 70s, the 80s, and later in the 90s. And it all seems so bizarre, so sci-fi, that it undercuts something we would desperately love to be able to say. We would love to be able to say, we wouldn't do that. But it gets harder to say that, particularly to minority communities, when they come up with people in minority communities have a theory or an argument, and we'll talk about some of them, to say, we wouldn't do that. That's not something that the United States government would do, right? So throughout this period of revelation, one of the things that's so frustrating is that the people who were involved are not punished, right? MK Ultra doctors, CIA agents that dose people with LSD, none of them go to jail. People who were in Iran-Contra are found guilty, but then pardoned and oftentimes find their way back into the United States government, right? There's revelation without repercussions. And there's a sense that some people are above the law. That yes, the government allowed the small fish to take the fall, but what was really going on was never revealed. And that area, that dark area of we know there are secrets, we know that bad things are done, allows people to come up with conspiracies that simply expound those into new levels, oftentimes new levels of complication and horror, right? So Skull and Bones. This was established in 1832 at Yale University. It meets in a windowless room on Yale University campus called the Tomb. It picks people who are going to be successful, about 15 of men and now women every year. Have you guys heard of the Skull and Bones? So there are societies with secrets, but are they secret societies? And how do they tie into the other things we talked about, right? So this is the Skull and Bones class of 47. This is a headline from the New York Times, which is Yale, a great nursery of spooks. One of the things you might not know about Yale is that Yale was directly connected through its membership into the OSS and later the CIA. Many of the great leaders of the CIA, many of the people that you know, number of people who are assumed to be the people on the three tramps on the grassy knoll were Yaleys, right? Cord Meyer, James Jesus Angleton, right? McGeorge Bundy, all Yaleys, some of them were Skull and Bones, some of them weren't, who later went into the OSS and then the CIA. The CIA, in 1943, 42 members of that class go on into the OSS, right? There is a statue in front of CIA headquarters who is Nathan Hale. Nathan Hale was the first spy killed by the British in the American Revolution. I regret that I have one life to give for my country. That statue that is in front of CIA headquarters is a model of another statue on Yale University campus because Nathan Hale is Yale University class of 1773, right? Now, again, you move forward and say, well, we get to 2004. You have two bonesmen. One, George W. Bush, whose father was a bonesman, whose father was also the head of the CIA, also the head of a major oil company, whose father's father, his grandfather, Prescott Bush, was also a bonesman, running against another bonesman in 2004. So now the arguments are, there's a secret society at Yale that's plugged into the American Intelligence Agency that's done, like, the guys who are sitting and writing Northwood's, maybe not, but the sense is they all just came from Yale and played squash together and then said, why don't we have a false flag operation, right? I don't know that that's true, but you see the pieces are there, right? A secret society of wealthy individuals all together planning this. And this is the stuff that conspiracy theorists move. And when they were asked about it in the 2004 election, both of them refused to comment. George Bush saying something to the effect of, it is a secret society and I don't talk about secret societies.
Now, is it just me, or did he just name off 20 different things for like 15 minutes, and of one thing after another that are proven true, and then he goes, and it's those kinds of things that makes those conspiracy people just go crazy. It's like you can't name off 20 things and say that's what drives us crazy when they've all been proven true. It's the opposite of proving us wrong. You get it? I think you do. Let's get back to it.
Right? So it's a society with secrets, but is it a secret society? Right? Another one is the Bohemian Grove. Has anyone heard of the Bohemian Grove? The Bohemian Grove is a large collection of trees in Northern California, redwood forest. It is the site of a gathering every year of political, cultural, scientific leaders who come to the forest, closed to the press, and live in the trees for 2 weeks. Now, can anyone identify anyone here in this picture? This is 1967 at the Bohemian Grove. Nixon on one side, Reagan on the other. The guy in the middle is Harvey Hancock. He was the campaign manager for Eisenhower and also a big executive at Pan Am. This guy to the left of Nixon is Glenn Seaborg. Lindsay Borg discovered 11 elements, was a professor at Cal Berkeley, was also in the Manhattan Project at UC, and also was the co-winner of the Nobel Prize in 1951. So he's a leader of, and later on, moving for peace, arms control, etc. But these are the kinds of people who were there. Now, is it a problem in America that people have a secret society at Yale and with Yale's connection to the intelligence community, is it a problem that they gather in places that are defined as secret, the Bohemian Grove, right? Is it a problem that they are there without press, meeting and chatting? Maybe, maybe not. Is it a problem that they put on robes on one of the first days and have a ceremony in front of a giant statue of an owl in which they burn a human effigy at a ceremony called the cremation of care? I mean, so it's weirder, right? So we have, but so when someone who is inclined to conspiracy theories sees what the American government has actually done.
You know who that is? That's Sean Stone, ladies and gentlemen, the son of Oliver Stone. I wonder if he'll let me jump in here for a little bit. He looks like maybe he's going to talk to his dad.
Myths about the Illuminati,
fraternities initiation, right? Like not a lot of secrecy, not really like a lot of things, and not even really a lot of ideas and stuff being exchanged, because the actual education that he was trying to promote happened within the Minerval assembly. And so like the early Minerval degree is really kind of void of all the ceremony and stuff. But Kniga comes back and he adds a Masonic elements and makes it, for all intents and purposes, like a Masonic lodge, where these guys will, be assigned research papers and topics, research and report on them, and deliver these lectures and orations in the assembly.
well, you say that they're reading script. Well, who's writing the script? Is this based on ancient history schools, or?
That's what they would want you to believe. And what's funny is, like, in some of the internal correspondence, they talk about it and they say, we're really like someone who's read Crata Rapoa, like that, they really know everything there is to know about our mysteries. And of course, this is, 1784. And so what Adam Weishaupt was doing is he was trying to make this institution look like it was an ancient system, right? But it wasn't at all. What he was doing is he was taking Crata Rapoa, which, to his mind's eye, that was an ancient system right there. It's, kind of like the Egyptian mysteries was what was in Crata Rapoa. And so he's trying to communicate some of these ideas and stuff. And he goes forward with it and he puts it into a document, in the Minerval degree, but really what's going on is there's not really there's not any meat to it. So he writes the script and he goes back to go as far as,
Hi folks, welcome to RJ Impact. Today we're going to be talking about the Illuminati and the New World Order. History. The Illuminati, which is the plural of the Latin illuminatus, which means enlightened, is a name given to several groups, both real and fictitious. Historically, the name originates with the Bavarian Illuminati, a secret society founded on the 1st of May 1776 in Bavaria. The society's goals were to oppose superstition, obscurantism, religious influence over public life, and abuse of state power. The day, they said, is to put an end to the machinations of the purveyors of injustice, to control them without dominating them. During subsequent years, the group was generally vilified by conservative and religious critics who claimed that the Illuminati continued underground and were even responsible for the French Revolution. They were banned in Bavaria with the encouragement of the church, although continued despite this, with many influential intellectuals and progressive politicians counting themselves as members. The original leader was a man called Adam Weishaupt. The Illuminati were originally called the Bund der Perfektibilisten, but they changed their name as they found it too strange. In May 1776, the original 5 founders took the Owl of Minerva as their symbol. The members used aliases within the society. Weishaupt became Spartacus, and the other 4 became Ajax, Agathon, Tiberius, and Erasmus Roterodamus. In April 1778, the order became the Illuminaten Orden, or the Order of the Illuminati. Interestingly, one of the original names contemplated for the Illuminati was the D Order, which today wouldn't seem to capture the same gravitas as Illuminati does. The group started to recruit and adopted similar ritualistic ceremonies and hierarchies for its members as the Freemasons. In fact, the group developed lodges and also created affiliations with a number of Freemason lodges. Initially, the group spread widely and had affiliate groups in other countries such as the UK and New England, US. It grew widely in Bavaria, with a lot of its members holding positions of significant power in civic and court positions. Eventually, the group disintegrated through infighting amongst its leaders and the continued pressure of the church, who influenced the Bavarian state to ban it. It wasn't helped by its own members' indiscretions, which meant there was a lot of public disquiet with the amount of influence it had garnered. Modern day. In the modern day, Illuminati has referred to various organisations which have claimed or have been claimed to be connected with the original Bavarian Illuminati or other secret societies. These organisations have often been alleged to conspire to control world affairs by masterminding events and planting agents in governments and corporations in order to gain political power and influence and to establish a new world order. Some theories espouse the views that the Illuminati in the 20th century was led by Jewish leaders that propped up communist states and prolonged the Cold War during that time. Today's theories surround in particular some collegiate fraternities like Skull and Bones, gentlemen's clubs like the Bohemian Club, and think tanks like the Council on Foreign Relations or the Trilateral Commission of the American Upper Class, are front organisations of the Illuminati, which they accuse of plotting to create a new world order through a one-world government. In fact, a lot of fraternal societies in the US today claim to have links to the original Illuminati or have Illuminati as a level within their organisations. Events claimed to have been orchestrated by the Illuminati include the French Revolution, Waterloo, the assassination of J.F. Kennedy, and an infiltration of Hollywood in order to hasten the move to the New World Order. New World Order. The New World Order is really an umbrella term that refers to a number of visions of the world provided by theorists, generally underpinned by membership of the Illuminati in one form or another. Let's look at a number of the associated theories and organisations surrounding the Illuminati and the New World Order. End times. This theorises that, as mentioned in a number of books in the Bible, Ezekiel, Daniel, Revelation, and the Synoptic Gospels, that end times are coming. A number of influential people have made a pact with the devil and are merely pawns in an ongoing chess game which is eventually going to lead to a dystopian end time led by the unholy trinity of Satan, the Antichrist, and the false prophet. Freemasonry. There are huge numbers of theories relating to Freemasonry, but in this context, the most prevalent is the allegations that Freemasons have a hidden political agenda and are conspiring to bring about a new world order, a world government organised according to Masonic principles or governed only by Freemasons. The Protocols of the Elders of Zion. The Protocols of the Elders of Zion is an anti-Semitic publication, originally in Russian and dated from 1903. This states that there is a Judaic Masonic pact to rule the world on behalf of all Jews.
Next thing you know, he was like,
The protocols have long been proven a hoax and were created to support the Russian hierarchy's propaganda at that time. Despite this, belief in their authenticity persists. Brand tale. During the late 19th and early 20th century, English-born mining magnate and politician Cecil Rhodes advocated the British Empire re-annexing the United States of America and reforming itself into an imperial federation to bring about a hyperpower and lasting world peace. British statesman Alfred Milner and British official Lionel George Curtis were the architects of the Round Table movement, a network of organisations promoting closer union between Britain and its self-governing colonies. The Council on Foreign Relations began in 1917 with a group of New York academics who were asked by President Wilson to offer options for the foreign policy of the United States
Anybody else think this guy's voice is like, yikes, dude, why are you trying to? It's like he's got this really good information. Then he's there like, watch me put you to sleep with the most captivating information in the world. Man, I wanted him to get to the Rhodes Scholarship and how this Cecil Rhodes, he is such a setup there in that it ties right into South Africa, up to Zimbabwe, used to be known as Rhodesia. I knew people that were helping Ian Smith that had, you know, multiple weapons underneath the pulpit ready to try to send back in there. They were going to, you know, it wasn't that long ago that, you know, people were going like, you know, apartheid works, you know, what? We all doing it. You guys have only been letting black people vote for 7 or 8 years. Why are you dogging us about apartheid? Oh, to be young and know what I know now. Oh, wait, I still have to look up a video. I want to show you some more about this Cecil Rhodes, whether it's the diamonds or what is going to be the central of Africa. I feel like that's good stuff. I like this information, right? But
sees the connection that they can draw. That sees that, like,
I just don't want to hear him doing all of that super cool info and then never coming through with it. Where did I have that up with Illuminati? These are probably not the best way to do it.
And important copper mines, and Nyasaland with 5,000 white people. The object would be to speed development by pooling resources. Most advanced of the three is Southern Rhodesia, which is a self-governing colony with its capital at Salisbury. Southern Rhodesia is
We
developed.
just found an oasis in the middle of the desert and said, it's mine now for whites only. Whites only. Everybody else, get out of line, man. Get out of line. Oh, wow. Check this out. Orphan train, maybe. Hi, we're an orphan train. Who wouldn't be excited to get out of school to go see King George? Was that the 4th or the 5th? But, you know, the schools don't change. So if it's not for the clothes, the kind of grainy film, it'd be hard to tell what's going on there. They're in England. They're going to go check out Queen Elizabeth and King George number 6. And this is when, as a matter of fact, the Queen, Queen Elizabeth is still the Queen. We've only had one Queen since that 1958 reset. Isn't that weird? Same queen. I don't think that's her in the back. I don't think that's her either. Remember when I was trying to make it be funny, like that's not her? That was fun. Well, that's not her either. The fun times never end. One of those might be the queen. I don't know I don't know what really a consort is in their context. A lot of the girls are wearing head covering. They want to see the queen. So do I. Where's the queen? There's the consort. No way. Where's Queen Elizabeth? Hey, you seen the queen? She's supposed to be about yay high. When she walks, she walks. When she talks, she talks. When she sings, she says, I've got a home in glory land that outshines the sun. I've got a home in glory land. Is she drunk? Where's the queen? Queen. They got me with the clickbait. They got me with the clickbait. Yikes. This looks like very revolutionary. Did you know how the volume works on your microphone? No comprehende. Huh.
Cecil John Rhodes was born middle class in 1853 in England. However, Rhodes would prove anything but an English gentleman. At a time when honor and honesty were supposedly class gentlemanly traits, Rhodes used deceit, violence, and fraud in the name of the British Crown, all to accomplish his grand imperial dreams. Rhodes believed with all his might that the British were the master race and hoped to expand their domination from Cape to Cairo. 17-year-old Rhodes migrated to South Africa with £3,000 in his pocket. There, he ran his brother's farm in the town before joining him in the Dun fields of Kimberley. His family's capital would multiply into a fortune so vast that Rhodes could successfully colonize and name entire countries after himself. The British South Africa Company, combined with Rhodes's greed, deception, and bigotry, would lead him to engineer the end of the great dynasty of the Matabele Kingdom. Welcome to Village TV as we tell the story of theft in Africa by Cecil John Rhodes. A theft so grand and vast in scale, it still today haunts governments and institutions throughout Southern Africa. His father was Francis William Rhodes. Francis William came from a wealthy family who held numerous business interests. He was educated at Harrow and Trinity College, Cambridge. After university at Cambridge, it was naturally assumed that Francis William would either join the family's real estate or brick manufacturing concerns. Instead, he chose to take holy orders, starting his career in the church as curate of a small parish church in Brentwood, Essex, built, it is said, at his own expense. Francis William would remain as curate of this small parish church for 15 years until he became the vicar of Bishop Stopford, where he remained until 1876. Cecil John Rhodes was born on the 5th of July, 1853, in the small hamlet of Bishop Stopford, England. He was the fifth son of Francis William and his second wife, Louisa Peacock. Rhodes had 9 brothers and 2 sisters and attended the local grammar school at Bishop Stopford. Growing up, young Cecil read voraciously.
I always enjoyed learning about Cecil Rhodes. One of my favorite books was The Covenant by James Mitchner, a really long book about the history of South Africa, and had a big part about Cecil Rhodes in it. What you need to know about the Rhodes Scholarship and what they do now, and both Hillary Rodham and Bill Clinton were Rhodes Scholars, and what they do is they get to go study in England and, you know, get degrees from there. It's a, you know, for very special people, free Ivy League in other countries. And while they're there, they get to interchange and go to different countries. And what they do is they get them drunk, take pictures of them, and blackmail them. That's what the Rhodes Scholars have done, you know, because those secret societies, they don't think like we think. And it took me a long time to catch on. I mean, it's like I told you, you just get wiser. You don't really get smarter, and you get wiser the hard way. You know, like I've told you, I'm never buying another oil painting from an Irish gypsy because I've learned my lesson. So I just wanted to make sure we're clear on Rhodes Scholars then, same now, and the 2 prime examples are the Clintons. You know, somebody's got pictures on them, just like, well, think of all the pictures that J. Edgar Hoover got, because him and Clyde, you know, woohoo, the gangway. Not that there's anything right with that.
But vicariously. His favorite book was The Meditations by Marcus Aurelius, but he equally adored the highly esteemed historian Edward Gibbon and his works of the great Roman Empire. As a teenager, Cecil suffered from terrible asthma and a possible cadmium problem. When he was 17 years old and hoping to improve his health, his father sent him to join his brother Herbert, who was cotton farming in Natal, South Africa. His father reasoned the warmer climate and business opportunities offered in South Africa would provide young Cecil a more promising future than staying in England. Young Cecil set sail on the Eudora from Gravesend, England in the summer of 1870. He had with him £3,000 sterling, capital that had been loaned to him by an aunt as he ventured to the colonies to seek his fortune. His destination, the British Crown colony of Natal, South Africa. Unbeknownst to all, was just how this feeble and sickly-looking teenager would change the world we live in. The young Cecil John Rhodes set foot on African soil for the first time on the 1st of September, 1870.
Man, I hate to interrupt again, but you see this map? When you read your Bible, can you see where my mouse is? Right now, it's circling the words that are in the closed caption box, and now it's going up around the doldrums. That type of a situation is described by the Apostle Paul in the book of Acts when he's on a ship and all of a sudden it lost its wind. And I think it has something to do with the way on the flat earth the currents, the prevailing currents are so different. See how it's kind of got the currents going in different ways here? These doldrums, it makes it hard. But they don't worry, they made it through, and here we are, just holding on.
Was just how this feeble and sickly-looking teenager would change the world we live in. The young Cecil John Rhodes set foot on African soil for the first time on the 1st of September, 1870, disembarking in the early afternoon at Durban Bay in the then British Crown colony of Natal. By the time Rhodes arrived at the farm, his brother had already left to travel 650 kilometers north to the diamond fields in Kimberley. Left on his own, Rhodes began to work his brother's farm, proving himself to be an astute businessman despite his young age. In October 1871, Rhodes left the Natal colony to follow his brother to the diamond fields of Kimberley. In Kimberley, Cecil's quarter claim and one of Herbert's 2 claims were very profitable. However, the haphazard nature of the diggings
were dangerous and could not be worked at all during the rainy season. Seeing an opportunity, Rhodes imported steam-operated pumps to keep the diggings dry. He then obtained contracts to service 3 of the largest mines in the diamond field. He would prove very enterprising, introducing new mining methods in working diamond claims, dealing in diamonds, operating the only ice-making machinery that supplied ice to miners in the hot Kimberley sun. Other enterprises included wire rope manufacturing, insurance agent, and a wine and cigar merchant. When Herbert suddenly left in November 1871, the young Cecil had a chance to show his maturity with full control over all their claims. By 1872, approximately 50,000 men had encamped in the Kimberley Diamond Fields area. Tents were replaced by corrugated iron and mud brick houses, rudimentary hotels, bars, brothels, banks, stores.
Now, when you build a real city that's not an ordered kit town, that's what it ends up looking like. Can you feel it?
A church, a school, the famed Kimberley Club, and the Stock Exchange. In 1872, and after establishing himself, Rhodes met Charles Donnell Rudd, and they became firm friends and partners. Rudd studied at Harrow, where he won the mile and kept wicket. He attended university at Trinity College, Cambridge, where he excelled in playing rackets. In the early 1870s, he worked for his brother Thomas's Port Elizabeth-based trading firm. By 1873, Rhodes had assets worth over £10,000, enabling him to leave to study in Oxford. He entrusted his claims to his new partner Rudd and sailed to England. In 1873, Rhodes returned to England to complete his studies. He was admitted to Oriel College, Oxford, but only stayed for 1 term in 1873, later returning for a second term in 1876. In 1870, art critic, social reformer, and professor of fine art at Oxford, John Ruskin, made a speech which would resonate and reinforce Cecil John Rhodes' own attachment to British imperialism. In his speech, John Ruskin announced a new role for empire. He introduced the theme of imperial duty as Britain's destiny and how Britain had a mission to found colonies and settle them with young men who would advance the power of their own country. In Ruskin's own words, "There is a destiny now possible for us, the highest ever set before a nation. This is what England must do or perish. She must found colonies as fast and as far she is able, formed of her most energetic and worthiest men, seizing every bit of fruitful waste ground she can set her foot on, and there teaching these her colonists that their chief virtue is to be fidelity to their country, and their first aim is to advance the power of England." What Ruskin was doing was to introduce a new ideology for empire and adding a new justification for the annexation of new territories. Rhodes was often quoted describing a desire to paint the map red, referring to the red used in maps to denote the British Empire and his ultimate dream to build a railroad from Cape to Cairo. Cecil John Rhodes would define his radical vision of the cause, bringing of the whole civilized world under British rule, for the recovery of the United States, for the making of the Anglo-Saxon race into one empire. Before his departure for Oxford, Rhodes had realized that the changing laws in the Kimberley area would force the small man out of the diamond fields and would only leave larger companies able to operate in the mines. In light of this, he sought to consolidate a number of mines with his partner Charles Rudd. Rhodes further speculated and decided to move away from the new Rush Kimberley minefields, where diamond deposits lay higher in the ground and were more accessible, back to the lower yielding Old Rush area, where even richer diamond deposits lay deeper in the ground. Here, Rhodes and Rudd bought the costly claim of what was known as Old De Beers, which owed its name to Johannes Nicholas De Beer and his brother Diedrich Arnoldus De Beer, the original owners of the farm Vrouwtjes. It was this farm that would later lend its name to Rhodes and Rudd's ever-growing diamond company. In 1874 and 1875, the diamond fields were in the grip of depression, but Rhodes and Rudd were among those who stayed to consolidate their interests. To permanently keep the price of diamonds high, the supply had to be limited, and Rhodes believed this was possible if he had full control over all the mines in Kimberley. Rhodes had come to the realization that the only way to avoid the cyclical boom and bust of the diamond industry was to have far greater control over the production and distribution of diamonds. And so, in April 1888, in search of an oligopoly over diamond production, Rhodes and Rudd launched the De Beers Consolidated Mines Mining Company. With £200,000 capital, the company, of which Rhodes was secretary, plotted to expand the business and amalgamate all 622 registered claims in the region under De Beers Mining Company. Rhodes' main competitor in gaining full control over the diamond industry was Barney Bonato, owner of the Kimberley Central Diamond Mining Company, the largest company in Kimberley. In 1888, Rhodes and Bonato began the fight for control in earnest. Initially, Bonato had the upper hand, or so he thought. Bonato had bought up 4 claims in the center of the Kimberley mine and prospered so that he was able to form the Bonato Diamond Mining Company. He kept on buying up claims, and in 1885, he merged his Bonato Diamond Mining Company with that of Baring Golds to form the Kimberley Central Diamond Mining Company and set up offices in Stockdale Street. Cecil John Rhodes was actively buying up claims at the same time. Since his company was going so well, Bonato saw no reason to join any scheme of Rhodes's for amalgamation. However, one obstacle lay in the path of the Kimberley Central Diamond Mining Company, namely Compagnie Française de Dumont du Cap.
Oh my goodness. Now you know me. A lot of times people say I have an overactive imagination. Now we're going to go back, and I want you to try to let yourself have an overactive imagination. Is that map made in the outline of an eyeball? And it would be the right eye on the, look at the indentation. Oh my goodness. Ooh, spooky. There's the eye. And I wonder what we got going here with their mind claims, if these are really nerves and things, with their mind shafts.
Known locally as the French Company, owned by a wealthy Parisian diamond dealer, Mr. Jules Porge. By virtue of its position within the Kimberley mine and the policy pursued, the French Company impeded any success of future operations by Bonato's Kimberley Central. Consequently, Bonato made proposals to the French, but Rhodes had beaten him to it. And further, he had succeeded in raising the finance necessary for the purchase of the French Company in Paris. Rhodes then laid a trap for his rival. He told Bonato that he could acquire the French Company if he wanted it, and he would not ask for cash in payment, only the equivalent in Kimberley Central's recently issued shares. By this means, Rhodes was able to secure a foothold in the form of 1/5 of Kimberley Central's capital. The stage was now set, and a titanic battle for the remainder of Kimberley Central's shares ensued. Both Rhodes and Bonato bought recklessly, and at a time when the price of diamonds barely covered the cost of production, the company's shares soared from 14 to 49 pounds within a few months. Legend has it that after a weary 28 hours of negotiations in Rhodes,
The secret society said, white men will rule Africa if it's the last thing we do.
boardroom, he suddenly produced a bucket heaped with diamonds. "Sign, Barney, and it's all yours," Rhodes is reported to have said. "You can't quit me with bribes," Bonato replied. "But you have your fancy, as other men have theirs, and I see that I shall have to give you the means to go north." And so, in March 1888, Bonato surrendered his control of the Kimberley Central Diamond Mining Company. And on the 13th of March 1888, De Beers Consolidated Mines Limited was formally incorporated. Rhodes wrote out a check for £5,338,650 for the assets of Kimberley Central, which in those days was the largest sum of money ever covered in a single check, £4 million of which went into the pockets of the Barnato brothers. As part of the deal, Rhodes made Barnato one of the 4 life governors, arranged for him to be elected as Kimberley's Member of Parliament in the Cape Assembly, and procured a membership to the exclusive Kimberley Club. Barnato would remain as Member of Parliament for Kimberley from 1880.
All right, admit it. Who else wants to join the Kimberley Club right now?
Until his untimely death in 1897, reportedly committing suicide by jumping from a ship on the voyage back to England.
Yeah, right.
His body was recovered and buried in Willesden Jewish Cemetery in London, England. In 1888, with Rhodes as its first chairman, and 17 years after his arrival at Durban Bay, De Beers Consolidated Mines Limited was born. Rhodes had successfully amalgamated and dominated all of South African diamond mining, 90% of global production at the time. Controlling 90% of the world's diamonds made Rhodes an incredibly rich man. However, Rhodes was not after wealth for wealth's sake. He was acutely aware of the relationship between money and power, and it was power he sought. In a conversation with Hans Saud, whilst overlooking Kimberley diamond mines, Saud asked Rhodes, "What do you see here?" With a slow sweep of his hands, Rhodes answered with the single word, power. After all, Rhodes's imperial vision for Africa was never far from his mind, and it was about to be laid bare for all the world to witness. Riding high on De Beers' success, and as foretold by Barney Barnato during their negotiations, Rhodes looked northwards towards Matabeleland and Mashonaland in present-day Zimbabwe. Matabeleland fell squarely in the territory from the Cape to Cairo, which Rhodes hoped to conquer in the name of the British Empire. It was also believed to hold vast untapped gold fields, which his partner Rudd believed would be of far greater value than those discovered in the Witwatersrand. In 1887, while Rhodes was consolidating, the Matabele king, Lobengula, signed a treaty with the Transvaal government, Dutch Boer settlers who colonized the Eastern Cape. This act convinced Rhodes the Boers were trying to steal his north. The scramble.
Boers is Afrikaans. It means farmer.
For Africa dominated the 1880s. And after the Berlin Conference of 1884 to 1885, Rhodes became convinced that the Germans, French, and Portuguese were all going to try to take Matabeleland. As a result, Rhodes decided to mobilize quickly and get Matabeleland under British control. The British government officially opposed further colonial expansion north of South Africa. However, Rhodes deviously painted the threat of other imperial powers like Germany taking over the land to push the British government into action. In response, the government sent John Smith Moffat, the Assistant Commissioner to Sir Sidney Sheppard in Bechuanaland, to negotiate a treaty. The result was the Moffat Treaty of February 1888, a relaxed protection treaty between Lobengula and the British government. Rhodes found himself an irrelevant player in this arrangement. This, despite his initial encouragement for the...
I'm sorry, I didn't get a chance to finish reading that. So they're on year 1836. But it wasn't done before February 11th, 1888. Okay. Why should anything be not confusing?
Between Lobengula and the British government. Rhodes found himself an irrelevant player in this arrangement, this despite his initial encouragement for the government to get involved in Matabeleland. Rhodes was desperate for exclusive mining rights in the region and worried the Moffat Treaty was too weak to hold Matabeleland. Convinced the Dutch and Germans were making plans to take the territory, Rhodes concocted his own plan to take control. With his partner Charles Donnell Rudd, Cecil John Rhodes formed the British South Africa Company. Patterned after the British and Dutch East India Companies, it was a commercial political entity. The British South Africa Company's purpose was exploiting economic resources and political power to advance British finance capital. In March 1888, Rhodes sent Rudd to Lobengula with a contract granting exclusive mining concessions to the British South Africa Company. When Rudd arrived at Lobengula's kraal, however, there were numerous British concession hunters already there, plotting the same maneuver, offering protection against the Dutch.
Man, I was just going to say something about those officers' uniforms, but I guess they brought the mercenaries with the guns, the machine guns. That's a Gatling gun. Yikes-itty doodah. Some sort of European version, I'm sure.
Europeans, or even local enemies, gave the British South Africa Company the edge. Rudd was able to get Lobengula to sign a concession giving exclusive mining rights to the British South Africa Company in exchange for protection against the Boer and other neighboring tribes. The young warriors of Matabeleland were rightfully angry and were itching to attack the white men who entered and occupied their land. Preferring peace, King Lobengula feared his people would be defeated if they attacked the whites. He likely signed the Rudd concession in hopes that British protection would prevent Boer migration into Matabeleland, which would incite his warriors to battle. King Lobengula's options were severely limited. Concede to the British or take the chance of war with Dutch settlers. Seemingly more lenient and liberal, the king chose the British, believing he was protecting both his subjects and kingdom's interests. Using the Rudd concession, despite initial resistance by the British government, Rhodes managed to acquire a royal charter for his British South Africa Company on the 29th of October, 1889. The royal charter allowed Rhodes to act on behalf of the crown in Matabeleland. It gave the company full imperial and colonial powers, including to create a police force, fly its own flag, construct roads, railways, telegraphs, engage in mining operations, settle on acquired territories, and create financial institutions. Cecil John Rhodes would convince the British government to give his company the right to control parts of Matabeleland and Mashonaland deemed not in use and to provide protection for the African residents on land that would be reserved for them. This proposal, which would cost the British taxpayer nothing, but would extend the reach and wealth of the British Empire, eventually found favor in London. For Rhodes, the British South Africa Company, with its royal charter, was his means to expand the British Empire, something a timid government and penurious treasury were not about to accomplish. After gaining his charter from the British government, Rhodes and his British South Africa Company partners felt that Matabeleland and Mashonaland were under their control. In Rhodes's view, war with the Ndebele was inevitable, and he would not allow his dream of empire to be thwarted by a savage chief with about 8,000 warriors. Cecil John Rhodes was determined that white settlers would soon occupy both Matabeleland and Mashonaland, and further, to ensure the Ndebele could not resist them. To gain power over Matabeleland and Mashonaland, Rhodes hired mercenaries, Major Frank Johnson, Major Maurice Heaney, and Frederick Courtney Saloon, a hunter with close knowledge of Mashonaland, to raise a force of 5,000 white men. Major Frank Johnson had promised to deliver to Rhodes the Ndebele and Shona territories in only 9 months for 87,500 pounds. Rhodes advised Johnson to select the sons of wealthy and influential families as recruits, in hopes that if the attack failed and the British South Africa Company force was captured, the government would have no choice but to send troops into Matabeleland to rescue the sons of Britain's elite. Rhodes called off Johnson's attack after receiving news that King Lobengula would allow British South Africa Company miners into Matabeleland and Mashonaland without any opposition. Despite King Lobengula giving his permission for hundreds of British South Africa Company miners to enter his territory, Rhodes double-crossed him with a new plan to eliminate any chance of resistance. And so, on the 26th of June, 1890, an invasion force of 300 policemen and almost 200 pioneers marched north across the Macloutsy River from Bechuanaland to Mount Hampton, 640 kilometers away. This was the Pioneer Column, dressed in military uniforms, brown corduroy riding breeches, leather leggings, army boots, and broad-brimmed hats with one side turned up. They were well armed with Martini Henry rifles, Webley revolvers, Maxim machine guns, and artillery. The pioneers had been selected from over 2,000 applicants in South Africa for their technical skills, riding, and shooting ability. Mechanics, farmers, butchers, bakers, and a large group of prospectors were lured by tales of an El Dorado with vast gold fields just north of the colony. Members of the pioneer column had been promised a salary of 7 shillings 6 pence a day, and by Major Frank Johnson, 15 claims in the gold fields and 3,000 acres of prime freehold farmland in Mashonaland each, a staggering total of almost 1 million acres. Rhodes's ploy was to put the king between a rock and a hard place, to either attack the settlers and be crushed, or allow a vast military force to take seat in his country. In the words of Rutherford Harris, one of Rhodes's associates, "If he attacks us, he is doomed. If he does not, his fangs will be drawn, and the pressure of civilization on all his border will press more and more heavily upon him, and the desired result, the disappearance of the Matabele as a power, if delayed, is yet the more certain. Gentlemen." On their march north, the column built 3 forts at Tule, Victoria, and Charter. They also built post stations every 25 to 35 kilometers of the journey between Bechuanaland and Mount Hampton in Mashonaland, where they arrived on the 12th of September 1890. The next day, on the 13th of September 1890, on parade, a young lieutenant, Edward Tyndale Biscoe, hoisted the Union Jack. A 21-gun salute was fired, and 3 cheers were given for the Queen, proclaiming the land beneath their feet British territory. The site was to later become the town of Salisbury, present-day Harare. Rhodes's British South Africa Company invaded and occupied present-day Harare without any resistance from King Lobengula. Salisbury became the base of white settler occupation in what became Southern Rhodesia and later the independent nation of Zimbabwe. The prospectors of the group and the British South Africa Company holders hoped to find a second rand in the ancient gold mines of the Mashona, founders of Great Zimbabwe, a late Iron Age kingdom. But on arrival, they soon came to realize the gold had been worked out of the ground long before. With no gold to be seemingly found in Mashonaland, Rhodes's British South Africa Company was facing financial ruin. After failing to find El Dorado, Rhodes granted farming land to hundreds of settler pioneers, going expressly against the Rod concession, and in so doing, Rhodes completely disregarded King Lobengula's mining concession and simply seized the land. In conceding exclusive mining rights to the British South Africa Company, King Lobengula had successfully avoided going to war over Mashonaland, kept his people alive and much of his territory intact. Unfortunately, this would not last long. Leander Starr Jemison, one of Rhodes's associates, suggested getting Matabeleland open would give us a tremendous life in shares and everything else. Gaining Lobengula's territory would also play into Rhodes's megalomaniac vision of expanding the British Empire from Cape to Cairo. And so, in 1893, the British South Africa Company clashed with the Ndebele in what Rhodes had perceived as an inevitable war. The settlers justified their initial attacks against the Ndebele to the British government by arguing that they were protecting the Shona against the vicious and savage Ndebele impis. This was, however, a ploy creating the impression that the Ndebele were the first aggressors, consciously concocted by Jemison and Rhodes to ensure the British government would not object to their further intrusions into Matabeleland. The final confirmation that the Ndebele could not avoid war came when Jemison was able to convince the British government that Lobengula had sent a massive impi of 7,000 men into Mashonaland. The British government then gave Jemison permission to engage in defensive tactics. There is no indication that the impi Jemison reported on ever existed. Lobengula himself, in a last appeal to the legal, rational system the British seemed so fervently to uphold, wrote to the British High Commissioner saying the following: "Every day I hear from you reports which are nothing but lies. I am tired of hearing nothing but lies. What impede of mine have your people seen, and where do they come from? I know nothing of them. It was, however, far too late for King Lobengula. With permission to engage in defensive action, Rhodes had joined Jameson in Montebello land, and his group of mercenary soldiers struck a quick and fatal blow. Cecil John Rhodes's mercenaries were in possession of the latest in munitions technology, carrying with them into the veldt Maxim guns, which, like machine guns, could fire rapid rounds. The Ndebele impis were helpless in the face of this brutal killing technology and were slaughtered in their thousands. King Lobengula realized he could not hope to face the British in open combat, and so he burned down his own capital and fled with a few warriors. Pursued and under duress, the king is presumed to have died shortly afterwards in January 1894 from ill health. The war against the Montebello, fought mostly by voluntary mercenaries, cost around £66,000. Most of the money to pay for this war came directly from Rhodes's Consolidated Goldfields Company, which by this point had begun to produce excellent yields from the deeper lying gold seams. The conquered lands were named the Federation of Rhodesia and Nyasaland. They included Southern Rhodesia and Northern Rhodesia, named in the honor of Cecil John Rhodes, and Nyasaland. Today, these countries are the independent republics of Zimbabwe, Zambia, and Malawi.
Wow.
Native Americans are stepping up efforts to pressure Congress to revoke medals of honor awarded for the killings of Sioux, including unarmed women and children, at Wounded Knee. On December 29, 1890, along the Wounded Knee Creek on the Pine Ridge Reservation in the southwest corner of South Dakota, the U.S. Army killed hundreds of unarmed members of the Lakota Sioux tribe, including many women and children. In the aftermath of one of the bloodiest acts of violence against Native Americans by federal forces, the government looked into the conduct of the troops of the 7th Cavalry and decided to award 20 medals of honor, the nation's highest military commendation, to soldiers involved in the massacre. Now members of the tribe are stepping up a long-running pressure campaign to have those medals rescinded, saying that the government should recognize the atrocity for what it was and take a step that could help heal the historical wounds of that day. They recently won support from the state Senate in South Dakota, which passed a resolution in February urging Congress to investigate.
Does anybody else think that they shouldn't have to fight to have them rescinded? That if we were any type of the good guys we claim to be, we'd step up?
Wounded Knee, the massacre, and it has never been resolved and there has never been closure, said Marcella LeBeau, a citizen of the Two Kettle Band, Cheyenne River Sioux. Ms. LeBeau, a 101-year-old veteran who served during World War II as a surgical nurse near the front at the 25th General Hospital in Liège, Belgium, and later worked for the Indian Health Service, is among those pushing for the medals to be rescinded. Ms. LeBeau said she was especially bothered by the fact the country's most prestigious military decoration was awarded to men who slaughtered women and children. Many of the award citations noted gallant conduct in battle and distinguished or conspicuous bravery, while documenting few details to justify those characterizations. To date, the nation has awarded more than 3,500 medals of honor, including about 400 to soldiers who fought during campaigns against Native Americans. About 900 awards have been rescinded, according to the Congressional Medal of Honor Society, most for awards made during the Civil War, but no medals awarded for service in the Indian campaigns have been revoked. Troy Heiner, a Democrat who serves in South Dakota's state Senate, sponsored the resolution calling for a congressional inquiry. Mr. Heinert, a member of the Rosebud Sioux tribe, said Congress and the Biden.
You ever heard of that Dr. Livingston, I presume? He had a star fort, Kit Town, in Africa. Very interesting. When I found that out, I was surprised.
In the middle of the 19th century, England was at the height of her empire to the Zambezi in a steamship called the Mar Robert. Having charted the existence of another great waterfall, which they named the Murchison Falls after the expedition sponsor, they came upon the southernmost tip of Africa's Great Lakes, Lake Sherwood. Livingston remembered.
A goodly sight it was to see.
I bet it was.
Surrounded by fever. Sometimes they had to march up to their necks to swamps infested with leeches or crocodiles. Stanley gives colourful descriptions of his experiences.
Decency forbade that I should strip and wade through this sedgy marsh naked.
Southern area of the lake. A mistake that was to cost him his life. Livingston believed that the source of the Nile was a western branch of the Lualaba River, which lay to the west of the lake. By December 1872, the doctor was floundering through the swamplands that he'd failed to mark on his maps of the southern shores of Bangweulu, suffering severely from dysentery. His two companions, Susie and Chuma, often were obliged to carry him across flooding rivers and quagmires in appalling weather. Rain. Rain as if it never tired. Livingston
Man.
journal. Its words must have been as sweet as any Stanley had ever.
Faithfully unless death prevented me. I now write to inform you that I have redeemed that promise.
You know, I think it was.
To do my duty to the New York Herald, I halted at nothing. Was ever pushing on until my men cried out in sheer fatigue, "Have mercy!" I can't say that I feel much worse, though I look 10 years older.
Man, spare me one more minute. Now, he's the guy that had the Kit Town in the middle of Africa. The guy who found, oh, you're Dr. Livingston. Yeah, that was Morton Stanley.
It's not a great likeness, but that's Henry Morton Stanley, the first European to travel the Congo from its source to the sea. Stanley was a Welshman who took 999 days to travel here from the eastern coast of Africa. It was an epic journey and opened up the interior of Africa for exploitation.
Le voyage de Stanley avait un but. Le but, comme je vous ai dit, pour le roi Léopold II, c'était à découvrir le Congo parce que quand il avait traversé le pays, qu'il est allé dire aux Anglais, comme je vous ai dit, que j'ai découvert une partie de la terre qui a tant de richesses, mais ce n'est pas colonisé. Si les Anglais avaient accepté, les Anglais, nous, on allait être colonisés par les Anglais. Mais après tout, on lui a demandé d'aller voir le roi Léopold II qui avait eu des possibilités, et celui-là s'est intéressé du Congo.
The Belgian king was looking for his own colony. The men met, and the Congo Free State was born. Boma was its capital. This was once the Governor General's residence.
Well, how about that? That was the Governor General's residence, and it looked kind of mud floody to me. You mud floody bandits.
My dad often visits Africa for his work, and when he comes back, he sometimes gives us some kind of tiny gifts, especially when we were young. About 10 years ago, he came back and he gave me this. This here is a block of natural rubber, which is, as weird as it sounds, tapped from the rubber tree. It's a resource that had a significant influence on the history of Africa, and more specifically, the Congo. This video is, as you might have guessed, not a psychology video as usual, but it's a video that I've been wanting to do for quite some time. It's a video about history, and it's a pretty bad yet unknown history. A history in which millions of African natives died. And it all happened because of one man, King Leopold II of Belgium. Before I start, I just want to warn you, this video might contain some graphic images. And also, if you're wondering, how much do you hate your kid if you give him a block of rubber? It's okay, I've also gotten regular presents. This was just something which he had received when visiting a rubber plant. That being said, welcome to Brains Applied. In 1865, Leopold II, the eldest surviving son of King Leopold I, was crowned as the new king of Belgium. He was an ambitious man who wanted to increase the power and wealth of the tiny newfound nation. Belgium, after all, was very small in comparison to its baguette and bratwurst neighbors and had only existed for 34 years. To
Only
expand
34
the Belgian
years.
Empire, Leopold had been looking at Asia and South America, but these continents were already very much colonized. The most unexplored parts of the world were Africa and Antarctica. The last one obviously wasn't very interesting since its only resources are ice, penguins, and snow, but Africa seemed kind of promising, although only the coasts had been explored. So Leopold set up a conference with geographers and business people and explorers to discuss the exploration of Africa. The official reason was to improve science and to stop the Afro-Arabic slave trade, which was still very present in Africa. But many people close to Leopold, they knew the real reason. The conference resulted in the foundation of Leopold's Association Internationale Africaine to further his cause. And soon after that, Leopold learned that Henry Morton Stanley, the famous explorer, had finished his journey in which he crossed Africa. As he was the first Western person to explore Central Africa, Leopold hired him to go back and start outposts in the name of Belgium. Stanley was obviously very happy to return for a new expedition, so funded by Leopold's money, he returned and bought plots of lands for outposts from local chieftains, by supporting them with gifts and also by letting them sign legal paperwork, which was definitely very comprehensible to people that never saw a paper before. However, the Belgians merely owned little bits of land in Central Africa, and explorers from other countries, such as France, were eager to follow in their footsteps. As to avoid bitch fights between explorers, several nations decided that it was time to make official decisions about Africa. So in 1884, Germany, Austria-Hungary, Denmark, Spain, the United States, France, the UK, Italy, the Netherlands, Portugal, Russia, Sweden, Norway, and the Ottoman Empire gathered at the Berlin Conference. Important to know is that Leopold and his association wanted to...
Let's look at that map on the wall. I don't know if I see the Sahara Desert. I'm not sure what it would look like, but it doesn't look like what I think. And that's a big map.
Gathered at the Berlin Conference. Important to know is that Leopold and his association wanted a colony, but the Belgian government didn't, since they thought it would be a liability. So after pinky promising that they wouldn't ask the government for help, Financially or otherwise, Leopold was allowed to join the Berlin Conference to get a nice plot of land for his association. And after some debating, the countries at the Berlin Conference permitted Leopold to start his own nation in Central Africa, under two conditions. Free trade had to be supported for the countries that were present at the conference, and Leopold had to fight the African Arab slave trade. And that's how the Congo Free State was founded, controlled by the International African Association, of which Leopold was chairman. The new country was now safe from other countries, and slowly more parts of the land were explored. But the expansion was costly, while the returns were basically non-existent. They couldn't export enough ivory, as killing elephants and cutting off their tusks apparently isn't a good way to grow more elephants and more ivory. And taxes in the form of money couldn't be demanded from a population that never owned money in the first place. From 1876 to 1885, before his state was founded, Leopold had already invested 10 million Belgian francs, while earning merely 75,000 francs. By 1890, Leopold had invested 19 million francs, which, according to my calculations, equals 678 million euros in today's money. And he was close to bankruptcy. Leopold had no other option than going to the Belgian government for support. Of course, the government wasn't too happy about this because pinky promises are sacred after all. But it would be really embarrassing to let your king go bankrupt. So they decided to give Leopold a loan of 25 million francs and later on an additional 7 million francs, on the condition that if the financial situation wouldn't improve, Congo would become a Belgian colony. And then the jungle country went bananas. To maximize profits, Leopold decided that all ground that was not used by the locals would become property of the state, including the resources that could be found on these grounds. On paper, free trade was still allowed as was demanded by the Berlin Conference. However, Leopold's orders meant that the locals couldn't hunt and sell ivory or farm new lands without robbing the state. And this was very, very problematic because the natives used what is called extensive agriculture. Extensive agriculture means that instead of using and reusing the same grounds over and over again with fertilizer and all those kind of things to maximize the returns, you move your fields from area to area to area to area, and this allows you to use the best fields each time while the soil of the old fields can recover. But due to Leopold's new rules, this wasn't possible. Leopold now had a massive amount of land, but what was he going to do with it? One event changed everything. In 1888, the Scot John Boyd Dunlop had invented the inflatable rubber tire, a product that massively improved the comfort of cars and bikes, a product that skyrocketed the demand for rubber. This was Leopold's golden chance. Now, of course, he couldn't exploit all this land by himself, so he handed out licenses for an area of about half the country to several companies, such as the Anversoise and the Anglo-Belgian Indian rubber companies. Companies in which Leopold himself, coincidentally, was a major stakeholder. And all of a sudden, he was sitting on a gold mine. Do you remember how I said that you couldn't really ask monetary taxes from a population that never used money? Taxes were now to be paid in the form of rubber, and they were collected by either Leopold's army or the private militias of the rubber companies. Native men with barely any training and obviously armed with guns and machetes. They were paid according to the amount of collected rubber, following the principle, no rubber, no pay. And I think you can see now where this is going. It went awfully wrong. Women were held hostage while their men had to look for rubber. They were sexually abused, and handling too little rubber was punishable by death. Oh, and a casual whipping or the burning of entire villages wasn't that rare either. Nowadays, the Congo Free State is especially known for chopping off hands. And this did indeed happen, but mostly because the white leaders wanted to make sure that their soldiers didn't use their bullets to hunt. The bullets had to be imported from Europe, and since Amazon and next day delivery didn't exist yet, they were very expensive. So for each bullet that was used, soldiers had to return a chopped off hand. But punishing living people by cutting off their hands didn't occur that often. The idea that it happened everywhere mostly originates from the pictures that were spread throughout Europe. But it did happen in some cases. For example, some soldiers chopped off the hands of living people without killing them so that they could use the bullets for other reasons. Over time, the situation only became worse. At the time, there were no rubber plants. The natives had to harvest all the rubber in the jungle. And due to the unrealistic demands, they had to go deeper and deeper into the jungle each single time. And although the law only allowed them to work at most 40 hours per month for the state, they did have to work much harder while having no time and energy to work on the fields, which didn't have a high yield in the first place because Leopold had claimed almost all their land. If the natives weren't killed by the state, they would die of hunger, hardship, and diseases. There is no clear estimate of the amount of people that died during this period of time because there were no official population statistics, and Leopold had his archives destroyed. But the official estimate that the international pressure rose, and in 1908, the king handed over the Congo Free State to Belgium, making it an official colony. From there on, the situation in the Congo improved, theoretically. The reality seems to say otherwise. During his time, Leopold used his income to fund massive infrastructure projects in Belgium until his death on the 17th of December 1909, aged 74. The entire affair was swept under the carpet and the brutal officers just returned to their motherland without ever being punished. Of Léon Vivier, we know, for example, that he died in 1939 as a decorated
in China's capital, Peking, where from these ancient altars countless emperors had sought the mandate of heaven, the myth of heavenly rule persisted still. But deep within the palaces where China's Manchu emperors reigned, by 1900, that myth too was dead. For here ruled China's evil spirit, the Empress Dowager Cixi, a Manchu concubine, bedmate to an emperor for whom she had produced an heir. A woman with a gift of malice, said to have poisoned her own son upon his throne, installed her infant nephew as emperor, killed his mother, and then imprisoned him in 1898. An ignorant woman, but unchallenged ruler of the empire. Her court, a whispering of ladies-in-waiting and eunuch favorites. Chief among them, eunuch Li Lianying, as depraved as she. When told China needed ships to fight the foreigners, they used naval appropriations to build a marble pleasure boat in a nearby lake. Only one conviction bound her to her people, hatred of the contemptuous foreigner who tramped her land. 1,000 villages deep in China mirrored her primitive hatred of the foreign devil. Moreover, their passions had found flag and leaders as a secret brotherhood, the Boxers, began to flourish. Kill the white man, burn his mission, said the Boxers, claiming magic charms could make their bodies impervious to Western bullets. With the Emperor's consent, in early 1900, they began to kill. One of America's great novelists, then a missionary child, was at the time in China. Miss Pearl Buck recalls,
the Empress Dowager had issued an edict that all white people were to be killed. and many had been killed, especially in the north in Shandong, where men, women, and children, missionaries, and business people too, had been killed. But we were so fortunate because we lived in the province of Jiangsu, and we had a very good viceroy, an intelligent man, and he knew that it was folly for the old empress to think that she could gain anything by killing the missionaries and the business people, because there would be terrible retribution. And so he was so courageous as to insert a negative, a no, a not, into the imperial edict, so that it read, we were not to be killed. And that's what saved our lives.
Here at Peking, within these massive walls, for almost 2 months, 3,000 foreigners and Christian converts gathered under siege to fight for life. Their sandbagged embassies a bastion against Boxer fanatics. From around the world, navies rushed troops to raise the siege. Britons, Americans, Russians, French, Germans, Japanese raced with field guns and modern rifles, whose bullets no Boxer magic could resist. Victory was swift, punishment ruthless.
Well, that's one side of the story. I don't get to watch this.
Or in gardens.
They never thought it would rain. They thought it was foolish to go out in the rain and fight. So if it was a rainy day, you were quite safe and comfortable. And then, of course, they all usually began at a certain time. They seldom began before 10 o'clock after everybody got his good breakfast and all that. They always took off for lunch. And then by sunset, doesn't matter how hot the battle had been, when the sun set, everything stopped and quieted down for the night. So you could get a good night's sleep and be ready to fight the next day.
Now, John Birch was raised as a missionary child in this environment.
China watched such troops in shame, craving order, knowing sorrow. Overlord in Manchuria was Jiang Zuolin. Beginning life a common bandit, this scheming marshal had learned to mock old Chinese law, flout all patriotic need. Bribed by Japanese industrialists, protected by their garrison.
He means mafia.
His soldiers let the Japanese aliens exploit this northern treasure land at will.
It looks like a working star fort, or a cleaned up one.
Even the best of warlords, Feng Yuxiang, the Christian general who baptized soldiers with a fire hose, insisting cleanliness is next to godliness, groped in vain to find a spark to unify his nation. In every valley, town, and village, men trembled at the sight of warlord soldiers. Death came by twitch of trigger, in gusts of senseless cruelty. And life became so cheap that death itself became a spectacle. Children, growing up, became inured to violence, a culture of scholars transformed by killing. In flight from warlords, drought, and taxes, from loot and rapine, refugees knew that only in the colonies and concessions of hated foreigners could they seek safety. Here, beggars for their bread, they might find mercy. A former State Department officer, Ernest Price, remembers China in the mid-20s.
We hit the country at a time of terrific heat wave and at the same time drought in the Great Valleys. As our train pulled through this area, little boys at the stations would come out pot-bellied, spindle-legged, and full.
Gao directs Kanda, training school for guerrilla leaders. Junta deploys guerrilla bands hundreds of miles in Japan's rear. The people are the sea, says Mao Zedong. Guerrillas are like fish who swim in the sea. Within a year, such troops gather 200,000 peasant soldiers. The Japanese may seek cities, but the 8th Root Army holds all North China countryside about them. In the Yangtze Valley, however, all through summer 38, fortress after fortress of Chiang Kai-shek falls. The Japanese crunch on. By October, his last 2 citadels are doomed. First Canton, then 4 days later, Hankow falls. Killing prisoners, spreading horror where they go, the Japanese convince themselves that sheer stark terror will now at last persuade the nationalists to quit. The war is won. Yet still their prey eludes them. From Hankow, Jiang has planned retreat. His government is to settle at Chongqing, in China's deepest mountain fastness, Sichuan.
Yeah, you know where he died? That man, Chiang Kai-shek, they call it Taiwan today. And that's going to be as much a part of the news soon as what's going on in Ukraine. That's how this ties together. And those lives that they're living, it's because they believed that if you're around somebody in a city and you're young like that, they're going to take you and they're going to make you fight. That's what I'm afraid of. Doesn't have to be that way. That's what I'm doing here. Almost 3 hours, 2 hours and 35 minutes. If you could, I really appreciate you guys in there chatting and everything. I really do. Let's bow our heads. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you so much for your mercy, love to us, to give us a Bible, and to give us eyes to see and ears to hear. Thank you, Heavenly Father, for changing our heart and letting us hear your voice. We pray now for our brothers and sisters who couldn't be here with us. And we pray, Heavenly Father, that you will help each one of us to prepare for the refining fire. Heavenly Father, let that wood, stubble, and hay be replaced by gold, silver, and precious stones by doing good works in the name of Jesus. This we pray in his name. Amen. And I know I don't have to remind you guys, but we're saved by grace to do good works, to build up gold, silver, and precious stone, because we're not going to be able to carry it out except in our heart. And we're not even going to need it. We're going to throw it out at Jesus's feet, because that's what we do once we learn that mud flood was Armageddon and this is the flat earth nation. I'm never going to tell you anything else. Why would I, or why would my friends? Amen? We wouldn't, because we're trying to prove we have your best interest at heart. Amen. Hallelujah. Aho.